Hello and welcome to From the Be All End, the Burnley podcast. Well, we've been away for a couple of normal episodes due to the international break, but we are back fully energised, having competed for our respective international teams, or at least kind of pretended to be half interested in our respective international teams. And it's been quite a busy week, or at least a busy couple of days at Turf Moor. Although if you went on social media, you might not think so from the club's point of view. But season ticket prices have been announced, and as ever, it has caused a few comments, shall we say. There has been increases. For some people, it's a relatively minor increase of around 5%. But if you fall into one of the following two categories, the under 22s or the over 65s, it's fair to say that your wallet is going to be hit quite hard if you fancy following the Clarets at Turf Moor next season. We have had an absolute ton of people get in touch with us on social media. We're going to have a look at some of the comments that they've made. We're going to have a look at perhaps some of the thinking behind the club's increases in certain areas. And we're going to pick apart what we think the club are up to in terms of season ticket prices. We're also going to look at the Chelsea game, because this is a football podcast after all. The Clarets returning to action at Stamford Bridge. And we're also going to consider whether James Trafford has got himself in a position to go to the Euros this summer. I'm delighted to say that we've got Chris Borden, Justin Connolly and Paul Woodhouse with us. The Generalissimo, which we have to call him by law, he's off covering another stupid sport that I really don't get. He's doing some tennis tournament because he's a serious sports journalist. But hopefully he'll be back in next week, ready to, I don't know, probably have another go at JJ Watt for another Benny and Hot story. But you'll have to make do with us this week, I'm afraid. So let's get on to season tickets. Let's first of all put Justin on the spot. Justin, you sit quite close to me, don't you? We put every now and again on the concourse in the James Hargreaves Upper.
We fight to get to the front of the pie queue first.
Don't we just to get a burnt and or frozen pie. But it's fair to say we've got off relatively lightly, haven't we, in our stand? I think it's about 5%, just over 5%. So still inflation busting. But what was your initial reaction when you got the season ticket prices through? Were you relatively happy? Is that kind of increase fair, do you think?
Well, I find it really weird for a start that they expect you to pony up this amount of money without really knowing what you're buying for a start. You know, we don't know. I mean, it's pretty obvious what division we're going to be playing in next season, is it? But it's not certain. So you sort of expect to pay this money without really knowing what you're buying. Obviously, being the selfish, self-centered individual that I am, I only looked at the prices of my season ticket renewal. So I don't know about anybody else's. It's more than inflation, which I think, as I always say about these things, I'm not an accountant, but I do know that £25 on top of my £500 last season is more than the 3.8% inflation rate at the moment, which doesn't seem justified to me. I mean, we all expect prices to go up, don't we? But I don't. Why would they need to go up beyond inflation if it's just the club's increasing costs due to the energy prices going up and all that sort of stuff? Why do they have to go up by so much for other people in the ground? I don't understand it. The fact that they're targeting to people who traditionally have, in football terms, have had healthy concessionary prices shows, I think, the lack of sort of regard for the traditions of the game. And as usual, the club is benefiting at the expense of the fans again. I'm struggling to find a justification for it, really.
Yeah, and Chris, we've got a weird position, haven't we, in terms of with ticket prices and they're not being kind of universal, everybody goes up by 5%. So where I sit with my best mate and his dad, ours has gone up 5.05%, whereas Peter's has gone up by 25.26%. because he's a senior, so he's over 65. He's 72. He's Peter, so his has gone from 285 to 357. Ours has gone 495 to 520. It does feel kind of weird. I mean, if you're an under 22 in the same seats, so literally, the guy I sit next to is over 65, I hope. If not, it's been a bloody tough paper round. But he brings his kind of younger kind of, grandson, I think, on. His ticket will have also gone up if he's under 18 by just shy of 25%. But if he's 22 or over, his seat, which is next to him, will have gone up by 55.22%. So on our row, we have the full array of over 65s, under 18s, under 22s, under 12s, also up a bit, I think, adults, etc. So we're all in the same seats. We've all got the same view, yet somebody's paying 50% more than they were last season. I'm paying 5% more and somebody else is paying 25% more. It's an odd, it's a really weird thing, isn't it, Chris? Football ticketing and pricing and things like that.
Yeah, it'd be nice to hear the sort of thinking behind, let's say why they haven't just got a graph that can, you can give everyone the same sort of percentage increase, like Justin was referring to with the rate of inflation, etc. But and again, with likelihood is they'll be in the Championship, and there's 4 more home games than you would get this season. But on the back of a season where so far we've won 2 home games, justifying a big price hike seems, I think was it Stoke City have frozen their prices for about 7 or 8 years, I believe. Yeah. Just off the top of a tweet I saw the other week. So some clubs, obviously Stoke have been in the Championship since they were relegated. I think it's about six years ago now. So it's a different kettle of fish. But it just, I don't know. I'll go back to the old quote from Bayern, from Uli Hoeneß, that it's an old one now, but he's sort of saying that the Bayern could charge more than €104. Let's say we charge 300, we get 2 million more in income. But what's 2 million to a club like that? In this day and age, when clubs are paying, 20 plus million pound for a player, does an extra couple of million in season ticket sales really make the difference? And does it merit upsetting swathes of your supporter base to do so? I think there's got to be a real conversation about, we can all go and watch the English game and hark back to the roots of Lancashire, where it all began, and flat caps stood on the terraces coming straight from the factories to watch. It's been a working class man's game for as long as as the game's been played, and it seems to be moving further and further and further away. And it's almost as if, do they even want that that type of supporter at the ground anymore? Talking about Postecoglou at Spurs the other week being asked about sort of Premier League grounds seem to be getting more and more full of, and I'm not using the term day trippers. I'm using it because it was used in the question, but obviously, people who are coming from, for 1 or 2 games a season, they come and they spend more in the club shop perhaps than someone who goes to every home game might do, etc., and just trying to get more people, more different people over to watch your games and spend more money. But it needs looking at. It's just drifting further and further away. It's I think my last season ticket for the long side, when it was still a terrace, was £125 30 years ago. So in the scheme of things, I suppose it's not a colossal upsurge, but it's a lot of money, I still think, to watch football. 20's plenty, as the old slogan is. Yeah,
definitely. And would it, I mean, Simon made a good point on Twitter that actually, the notion of concessionary tickets is a bit alien to American sports, at least. If you look at NBA and NFL, they tend to be concessionary tickets for things like golf and tennis, which do attract an older audience. So do you think there's a bit of a, perhaps a thinking there in terms of, well, you know what, they've had it good for a while, but it's a bit alien to the ownership, and actually it might be the outrage that we're seeing on the forums and social media from, especially the over 65s who are kicking off, and rightly so. I think, some of the price increases for them, will bust the wallets a little bit. Do you think it's a trend we're going to see? I think we've seen that Spurs are doing something this weekend, protesting about saving over 65s because they're wanting to get rid of concessionary tickets. Or is it just the way the game's going that actually, you know what, fans are secondary? And it's not just Burnley, the clubs are up in arms over, season ticket prices, and we'll come on to where Burnley sit in the league in a second. But it just feels like a bit of a concerted effort, perhaps not just at Burnley, but across the league to be a bit like, look, if you want it, you'll pay it. If you don't, fine, exactly. We'll find somebody else.
Yeah, you look at that Daily Mail article that we were just talking about and Chris shared, and it's obviously across the board. It just seems a bigger amount for Burnley fans because there's been that 9-year freeze, hasn't there? And then obviously targeting the concessionary tickets. But to pick at the kind of American piece, I was just checking on the Cleveland Browns, who are the most unwinningest of all franchises in the US, having never won a damn thing. But if you think as to what happened to them way back when they had the franchise picked up and taken over to the Baltimore Ravens and they didn't have a side, this is the kind of respect that owners in the US have for the common fan. They don't give a shit, in other words. Yeah. And you look at their pricing and season tickets, etc., and it was a weird thing. There wasn't a full amount. You couldn't find it's going to cost you this amount to have a season ticket. You can get a season ticket, but it's priced at $65 per ticket. So they've given you the cost of a general ticket, and then you extrapolate that out. So it's probably about 9 home games that you get to go to, which is around about, say, $600-ish. So considering that, that's kind of the price that they understand that they can charge anything between 50 and say 70 quid per ticket. And I think that's the goal across the Premier League as to what they want to be able to target and get out of users. Because the Flask and Butty Brigade who go on Bob Lord, as far as Alan Pace and his cronies will be thinking, they'll be going, they don't make us a penny. We lose money out of these old bastards. Same for the, younger folks in the cricket field stand. And as far as they're concerned, that's anathema to the way that they want to run things. But there's a world of difference between the likes of Arsenal, Liverpool, and Tottenham, when you've got the likes of Man City and Arsenal vying for position as to how much extra revenue they can drive at a Champions League game, which is something along the lines of 2.4 million. That's a different world and a different argument to what Burnley's talking about. The PR fallout, the fallout throughout the community, they already aren't in good standing as a board currently. And if you want to start tipping yourselves over the edge, this is a fucking great way to do it. And there's a community responsibility. And we know that, football is obviously a bottom-up sport where it's top-down in the US. And they're going to come across a very rude awakening. It may be, and I think they're going to have a little bit of a reconsideration as to how they roll this out, because I don't think it's sustainable. And I'd like to see what they've worked out on the back of a crisp packet or whatever in terms of the extra revenue that this will generate. Because 6.4% for us per game is a drop in the ocean as compared to some of the larger clubs. So, whether we're cutting our noses off to spite our faces just to be a Me Too club because that's what everybody else is doing, I'd like us to think a little bit more outside the box as a community club and do something different. From a PR angle, I think that'd work infinitely better than what it is that they're trying to do now.
Yeah, and I think one of the big issues, just in, we don't know what the thinking is. We have reached out. I think everyone will have seen our tweets to Russell Ball and to Alan Pace, and to come on. And I contacted Russell Ball as well privately to say, look, the invite's there, and people who listen to this will go, well, he's probably not going to come on because you call him Bobby Ball all the time. But I come from a political journalism background, and if politicians, decided not to speak to people who called them funny names and took the piss out of them, then politicians would never get on TV and never get on radio. So we don't know the thinking. I mean, the club have put out a number of graphs that kind of show that actually when you look at ticket inflation, we're still lower. And there was some brilliant graph that said, basically, you should be pleased that actually the gap between what the ticket is and what it should be is actually lower this year than it was last year, kind of thing. So you get an even better value for money. But it is kind of, it does feel like a bit back of the fag packet from a working out point of view. And I guess it goes back to that communication again, doesn't it? It's just the way it's communicated. I mean, there's nothing, as far as I'm aware, certainly wasn't yesterday or Wednesday when the tickets came out, or the price came out. They didn't bother posting it on social media as if to say kind of, look, we know this is going to go down like a shark in a swimming pool. We're not going to kind of open ourselves up to that. We don't want to kind of see all the acts and the reposts and things like that. It's another kind of PR disaster to a certain extent when we talk about not engaging properly with fans, isn't it?
Absolutely is. I mean, it's not rocket science to suggest that it's going to go down badly when you put the prices up higher than the rate of inflation. And if you target particular groups in the ground more than you do others, that people are going to point fingers and say, hang on a minute, why is this happening? I think the general feeling is correct, though, that they don't, concessionary ticketing is costs them money. And if you look at it from a purely business perspective, if you're looking to maximize your revenue, you wouldn't have season tickets at all, would you? Any Premier League club wouldn't have season tickets at all, because most games in the Premier League are going to be a sellout. I can't think of many. I mean, West Ham maybe struggle to sell their stadium out every game, but I can't think of many grounds that wouldn't be a sellout, especially Turf Moor, which obviously is one of the lowest capacities in the league. So when you've got big clubs coming, if you're prepared to sell tickets in the home section to away fans, which we seemingly are, my season ticket gives me a seat that costs me somewhere around £26 per game over the 19-game season. Well, you could get 40, 50 quid for that seat if you sold them on a game by game basis. So if you're looking at it purely from a business perspective, the goal has to be to phase out season tickets altogether, doesn't it? But like you said, like's been pointed out so far, just how much of a difference does that make to the bottom line? Just how much difference would even doubling the price of the tickets in the stadium? It's only 22,000 tickets for every game, isn't there? Just over the course of the season, we're spending 120 million or something on players over the course of the season. That isn't even going to make the slightest dent in it, is it? So as a PR exercise, it would benefit a club like Burnley, which has this sort of community atmosphere around it, to look after the fans a little bit better and communicate things a little bit better to them. Because, as I've said many times, I do not believe that football should be run as a professional football should be run as a business. It's a community asset that should be run with that very much in mind. That the fans are number one in this, not the club. I mean, you would be criticising them if they didn't try to maximise the bottom line, wouldn't you? But at the expense of fans, to a degree that isn't going to make a massive amount of difference to the revenue generated in terms of, comparing it to what they get from TV money and all that sort of thing. They've been tone deaf on many things this season, haven't they? Like Woody says, they're not in good standing at the moment. a few decent results would definitely turn that around, because we only tend to talk about this behind the scenes stuff when it costs us money, or B, we're losing games a lot. And both those things have happened in this scenario, which I think is probably why there's a lot of noise about it. But there's a lot about it that doesn't make any sense, and there's a lot about the way that the club has communicated with the fans over the course of this season that doesn't make a lot of sense. Having said that, I have ponied up for my renewal, so I'm as guilty as anybody else for perpetuating this nonsense.
Absolute hypocrite in there, bloody hell. Yeah. Ponied up, taking use of the term ponied up, which I don't think gets used enough. I'm a big fan of using ponied up now. I mean, the club did what it usually did when it put this out. It basically went, well, we spoke to the fan advisory board. They did the whole kind of, we had detailed discussions with the fan advisory board. Now, I've spoke to a member of the fan advisory board, and he told me that basically the club meets, I think it's every 3 months with the fan advisory board. And they were due to have a meeting on March 14th. That meeting was postponed because Alan Pace had a board meeting, and they eventually got round to speaking to the fan advisory board on Monday of this week, Monday evening. Now, the fan advisory board were, by all accounts, kind of shown rather than consulted, shown the ticket prices. The club basically briefly explained the prices, and then, they got some pushback from the members of fan advisory board. But the fan advisory board get a lot of stick on social media and message boards as being kind of, criticised for being handpicked by the club. And, I get the point. Anyone could apply to be on it. Absolutely. But it does feel like, once again, Woody, the fan advisory board is being kind of thrown under the bus a little bit with we consulted with the fan advisory board. The press release says detailed discussions. One of the points that I've raised in a message to Russell Ball is, look, this is the only time they saw it, and they saw it for about 20 minutes. How detailed is that a discussion? But it does kind of show just how they almost disrespect that the club has for the fan advisory board, doesn't it? By saying, look, well, we consulted and they seemed all right with it, so that's why we've put it out.
Well, exactly. There's no way that the fan advisory board hasn't had the same conversation amongst themselves like we're having here, and like every other Burnley fan has had over the past 24, 48 hours. And for just, of course they're going to send a blanket statement covering their arses saying, well, the fan advisory board gave us a thumbs up. Thanks for coming. And that's basically it. It's just simply a way for them to be able to, brush whatever decision it is under the carpet, which is, slightly unfair, I think, on the fan advisory board. Because if they were to listen properly, I think it would be a resounding deluge of noise around what a ridiculous situation they're putting everybody in with regards to this in a lot of respects. But I think we've said it, better communication, more communication across the broader set of fans, especially on things such as this.
Yeah, definitely. And like I say, one of the things they were basically due to have their meeting in April. The club decided they were going to hold a short meeting on Monday to basically say, this is what we're doing. We see ticket prices. I mean, Chris, there's absolutely no way on earth that anything the fan advisory board might have said, and I believe there was, quite a bit of pushback from members of the fan advisory board, especially around the, disproportionate percentage increases for the under 22s and over 65s. There's no way that if you're having a meeting on Monday night, you're suddenly going to spend all the Tuesday coming up with a better plan and a cheaper plan and a much better thought out plan to then put out on a Wednesday. I mean, it's a done deal when it goes before the fan advisory board on a Monday, isn't it? Which again is that level of, it kind of makes a mockery of them having this fan advisory board and puts the members in a bit of an uncomfortable position when they're getting slated on social media.
Yeah, you'd imagine sort of graphics and all sorts of that have been prepared, and they can be redone the touch of a button on whatever computer they've got. But as you say, there's no time really to turn around significant change in that front. And as you say, if members of the board are then like seemingly complicit in those decisions, and if they've not had sufficient opportunity to sort of have those detailed discussions and really delve into the nuts and bolts of it, it's not really fair on their behalf. But there's all sorts of different matters though as well. I believe there's in the some of the is it in the Jimmy Mack? I think they're extending the hospitality areas and places like that.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, some people have been told that, listen, your seat's not available, which they're perfectly entitled to do. But some fans who've had those seats for donkey's years are basically being told, well, if you pay $3,000 or so, you can have a hospitality. It's like, well, is that a realistic? And fine, you're going to get another seat somewhere else in the ground. But as we all know, we're creatures of habit, and you've probably got mates in that area, and you've got all your rituals and this, that, and the other. And people don't like change at the end of the day. But I mean, if those hospitality areas are being extended and being improved, and so be it. It sounds like they are at least making a fist of, trying to reach out to those people. But there seems to be of those fans, there seems to be a bit of upset. So again, if you ask those supporters, I think they'd say that could have been handled a bit better as well.
Yeah, I believe people have got emails to basically say, I'm really sorry, but you're going to have to move your seats because, there's some Hooray Henry from an away team wanting to kind of buy that hospitality. And I guess that is indirect, a result of the issues we had against Everton, Liverpool, and other games this season in the North, the James Hargreaves upper. But yeah, it does just feel a bit kind of like, every single move is about squeezing either the most out of people or the potential to kind of make money out of the kind of corporate game as well. Just kind of we'll go through some of the we'll go through some of the comments we had on social media in a second. But somebody pointed out, I think it was Aaron Wright. I'm just trying to find the tweet. I think in terms of what the club have done, and we are guessing, if you will. But yeah, Aaron Wright, so Aaron97AW on Twitter said, basically, the changes in season ticket prices, I've noticed that over 65s and under 22s are now roughly the same. So that's basically creating a single concession. So rather than having two concessions, and there's still a cheaper concession for under 18, still a cheaper concession in the Jimmy Mack stand for under 12s. But what it does look like, and the graph that another one of our followers, David Clark, who's been doing lots of Miles for Lyle, basically all over Europe and as well as this country, he produced a table which showed you the percentage increase and what they went from and to. But it does check out. I mean, on David Clark's graph, it does look like all of those under 22 and over 65 tickets are now being brought in line to create almost a single strand. Now, I'm sure that won't, that's no way of appeasing those two groups because they're being hit with, ridiculous hikes. But Justin, it does almost feel like they've kind of overcomplicated in the past the segregation. I think the Burnley way on Twitter said that in response to us. The segregation of tickets has been weird. There's lots of different categories, and what the club look like they're trying to do is squeeze everything down into as fewer ticketing price points as possible. I mean, it kind of makes sense, and maybe kind of when we look at it next year, that new group, might have lower than expected increases to kind of make up for it. But you just want the club to explain that, don't you? Look, this is part of a 3-year period where you're going to have pain in year one, but then you're going to be, better off in year 2 and 3 because you're not going to have much of a rise if a rise at all.
Yeah,
But it kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
It sort of does make sense that they want to simplify things and bring everything into line. But it's like we've said so many times on this podcast, the lack of communication to explain what the direction of travel is leaves this vacuum into which people will speculate about motives. And that's not helpful to anybody, is it? It's not helpful to the club because, they get a lot of bad press today and a lot of negative comments on social media. If they'd just come out and said, this is what we're thinking, this is what we're trying to do, as long as it's fair and equitable and reasonable, then Burnley fans aren't stupid, are they? They will accept that. But if they know what's going on and if they know what the direction of travel is, and that does sort of make a lot of sense, doesn't it? The idea that you want to standardize things and bring a simplified ticketing system into place. But tell us that's what you're doing, and then it makes sense. Otherwise, while speculation starts about what and people get annoyed about things that perhaps they shouldn't be annoyed about, because perhaps in the long run the direction of travel is taking us to somewhere that's better. I mean, I suspect the silences would suggest that the direction of travel isn't taking us somewhere better, and that's why maybe they're not telling us the story. But I'd prefer transparency and honesty, and I think most people would as well.
Yeah, and we've used the gag before, but I'm sure Davy Clark's not the only one who's not glad all over at the season time. But boom, there we go. Dave
That's
Clark,
one for the kids. Yeah,
there we go. Get that in your cultural reference. Cultural references.
The other question is why? What is the traditional thinking about why the over 65s and the under 22s or the 21 or the 18s or whatever it is? Why do they get cheaper tickets? What the club must be thinking about that. I mean, I suspect that sort of tradition and that sort of was brought in at a time when perhaps pensioners were seen as maybe not being on the thick end of a decent wedge. But I think that's sort of changed a little bit now, isn't it? I'm not entirely sure that pensioners are as hard done by as they were sort of when this sort of system came in. I don't know. I don't know the numbers, but it's an interesting question, isn't it, as to why these two particular groups get special pricing. What is the thinking behind it? Why is it? It's something that was decided on years ago that still perpetuates now. Maybe the circumstances have changed. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that is a point. I mean, especially on the kind of pensioner front or the over 65s. A few people have said they've never really understood why they get such a cushy deal. The current prices for next season, again, Aaron Wright's worked this out. Obviously much better with figures than we are. That new concession for under 22s over 65 is roughly 31% cheaper than a full adult ticket. Now, if that's with the increases, it really was a good deal for those two groups. But certainly the kind of wider pensioners get, pensioners are the only ones with money. Why do they get the better end of the stick? Is a common theme in the comments. Just a couple of others. A few people commenting. So Austin Baldwin Wookie on Twitter. How do these prices compare with other championship clubs? Moaning about a 25% increase is valid, but it may be that you'd still be paying less than most fans at other clubs in our division next season. So Austin is certain we're going to be in the championship, and I don't blame him for that assumption. And interestingly, we did look this up, and I think we had some figures. I think based on this year's price in the championship, we'd be the 8th most expensive, cheapest ticket. But we did have a Sheffield Wednesday fan get in touch with us on Twitter, and he said, just for reference, I paid $570 at the earliest possible date for a season ticket for Sheffield Wednesday next season, and it'll be a good chance that will be League One. The cheapest season ticket you get for us was behind the goal, and that was £460. That's for next season at Hillsborough, and they are absolute almost certain to be in League One. Chris, I mean, the increases are one thing, but we should probably be fair to the club in that, one of the graphs that they put out showed that we would be amongst the cheapest in the Championship and the Premier League, even with the new prices. So we can complain about the cost of football, and it's a problem throughout the sport, but there is still value there. It's just that when you get the increases and you see the increases in pounds and pence and percentages from one season to the next, it makes you kind of suck your teeth in a bit, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. For that Wednesday fan, I mean, that's absolutely staggering. Considering they've been in the Championship for a season after a few years in the third tier.
Yeah, they were the dearest, cheapest ticket, if that makes sense. I think they were the most expensive, cheapest ticket this season at £504.
And you think that was odd when they were last in the Premier League.
Middlesbrough's were £590.
Middlesbrough £590. Wow.
Yeah, they're the most expensive.
They're the most expensive.
But again, you got a lot of these Championship clubs, and we're talking about how much the season ticket sales make a difference. The Championship is the one league where clubs are sort of historically stretching themselves financially to breaking point to try and get the pot of gold, aren't they? So I can you can almost understand it a little in the Championship, because they're probably telling their supporters that, listen, we're trying to have a go here. We're trying to bring the best players in that give us a chance. We're spending above and beyond what we bring in, and just thinking of the prize at the end of the road. And it's a crazy old league, the Championship, but and there's some big old clubs in it as well. So like Sunderland's, Sunderland packing their place out every other week, etc. So they probably do. It probably does alter their transfer budget to that extent. But it's we'll see. But as Woody was saying before, I went to watch New York Giants a few years ago, and that cost me three figures for one game. And even it was a resale ticket, but it would have been three figures either way at face value. So maybe that's the sort of that's what they're used to, isn't it? That sort of price point, and maybe we're sort of inching towards that, really.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of direction of travel into it. And as we said, there are other Premier League clubs where kind of fans are kicking off. But I mean, somebody made the point, I think it was Simon actually in our WhatsApp group, Woody, that obviously with the regulator coming in, it almost looks like clubs are trying to squeak all this kind of shit news in, and this kind of look, pay it or somebody else will, before the regulator. And I've still got kind of massive concerns over how useful a regulator is going to be. It does feel a little bit like clubs are trying to get to a point knowing that actually they might not have as much wriggle room for increases once the new regulator comes in, doesn't it?
It does seem that way, doesn't it? And I mean, just going on about prices, the new Fulham stand, anybody who's getting a season ticket in there next year are going to have to pay $3,000, which amounts to 157 a game. And so across the board, they're taking the piss. We were thinking this was quite insular until we started seeing everybody else kicking off about it. And I think, the way the Premier League is being looked at currently, and is losing, value and brownie points across the board from all fans. Anybody who comes up from the Championship doesn't really want to be there because they know it's a whipping boys league, etc. There's only really the top six who can get any money out of these, ticket prices, and everybody else is just kind of left, trying to work out how much it's going to cost for a third kit, etc., and whether they can afford to go to Chelsea on a bus. But it's until we actually take a step back and either coordinate something and say this is kind of enough, stop taking the piss, then they're just going to shaft us, and they will shaft us, and they'll shaft us extremely hard, and it'll be fairly quick, regulator or no regulator. They'll get away with it. And you know perfectly damn well if you just look at kind of the American pricing model and the way that they go, it's about packages as opposed to concessions. It's like, there's your standard general ticket. Now we've got tiers. If you want a better package in a particular suite, it's this amount, etc., etc. So you're paying for different experiences, rather than you get a seat in one of the better areas, which obviously really annoys them as well, And so, yeah, I think we've only got a relatively short window to make our, selves known with regards to some of this. But
yeah,
they've never really given a shit, have they?
I think that's a fair point. I have to say though, if Bobby Bow did decide to bring a swimming pool to the turf like the new Fulham stand, I would definitely be in my speedos at half time with my doner kebab sausage roll. Living it up with a view of the Leeds Liverpool Canal.
Yeah,
in my trunks, giving it large when we're getting beat 3-0 at home by Plymouth or whatever this time next year. So. If they want to introduce a James Hargreaves upper swimming pool deck, I'd be all in favour of that. I have to say, I did see just very briefly before we move on to Chelsea, and you'll probably all remember this. Did you remember the original plans for those new stands? They were almost going to have like a big balcony on the back overlooking Beale Park and the old what is now the leisure centre, I guess, or the fan zone. And I saw them pictures the other day and I thought, God, how good would that be to almost have a terrace to kind of go on at half time and, you could have you could have drink and, rather than the smoking area with the steward watching the door to make sure nobody's getting in without a ticket. It could have been so much different, couldn't it, had we gone with those original drawings that were publicised?
We could have had Def Leppard on the turf, couldn't we?
Of course.
Or did that really happen? I don't know. Watching Dave Fishwick's film.
Yeah,
maybe he did.
Def Leppard apparently been in town this week filming for the sequel to that film. I mean, I'm very surprised we can get a sequel out of it. I have to say.
Are you referring to the plans where they were going to turn the cricket field stand into something that could turn into a stage?
No, not that one. So that was the Paul Fletcher. This was kind of like 94. When we did the North Stand and the East Stand as was before sponsorship. I'll share the pictures. They were incredible, like the drawings of what they were going to look like. But they were going to basically have a balcony or a terrace from the upper tier on both stands, so you could kind of, a bit like they do it like Wembley and things like that, like a big terrace area. But And the other thing that somebody pointed out to me a couple of a good few years ago is we had 4 stands named after people and only 2 of them had ever played for Burnley, because Bob Lord and Dave Fishwick. Oh no, only one of them had ever played for Burnley, because James Hargreaves,
James Hargreaves
had never played for Burnley.
Super player.
But crazy, isn't it? Crazy. There we go. Anyway, let's leave that there. We'll be back after this with a brief preview of the Chelsea game. Right then, so after the international break, I think we had something like 14, 15 players on the international break. It was quite a nice video. I don't know if anybody saw it on social media, where somebody's welcoming players back from the international break out on the socials. That was quite nice. I quite enjoyed that. Muric looked pretty happy. He was quite pleased they'd won. And somebody, I think it was the club photographer, Sharon, was greeting everybody as they came in the door, and the players looked in really high spirits, had been away. But we play Chelsea, and it's one of them weird games. I know we kind of have, when we played Chelsea at home, Simon predicted 4-1 to Burnley, which is one of the reasons we're stopping him doing predictions. But Justin, you are setting off.
Oh, yes.
I think you're setting off. I think you've already set off, haven't you? It's a bit of a long old slog on an Easter weekend down to Stamford Bridge. But you're going down. Are you going down with hope and expectation, or are you going down just thinking, Christ, keep it under 3?
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Yeah. Foolishly, I did that thing where you go on and you think, oh, I wonder if there's any tickets left for this game. I was actually looking for Liverpool tickets on the day. They'd already gone. And I went on the Chelsea tickets and there were 2 left. And knowing my boy wants to go to as many sort of Premier League grounds as as we can while we still can. I pulled the trigger. This was like a couple of months ago. So obviously now the reality of it's dawning on me, and we've decided decided to go down on the bus just to make a day of it. We're going to get a few tins in. We're going to cause some mayhem on the National Express. So if you're catching the same coach as me, watch out. That's all. That's all I'm going to say. When we get there, if we get there in time for the game, and even though we're setting off at 8:00 in the morning, it's still a bit of an if. I think. I'm not expecting a lot, but I mean, Chelsea have had a bit of a mixed season. Let's say. I think I was listening to Company on his press conference today, and they were talking a little bit about how there are some parallels between us and them in the sense that they're a very young side like we are, but there's obviously operating at a bit of a higher level financially than we are. And it does feel a little bit to me like they've turned a bit of a corner. They've had a few decent results. They got that draw against City, didn't they? Which was kind of, but I think they still are a little bit hit and miss. So I think it might be in service of my own sanity, but I'm not completely writing us off. It's got to be worth it. It's got to be worth the trip, hasn't it? So I'm sort of not entirely in total depression about it. I'm sort of thinking, it might just be one of those days when the effort pays off. You know what I mean? 1% joy.
He almost sounded convincing there, Chris, didn't he? I mean, I don't think he's convinced any of us that he's going to see anything. But I mean, you mentioned, and we've mentioned it a few times, we are due a big result against a big team, and I agree, Chelsea are, have struggled and things like that. But we have had a couple of decent away performances at big clubs, haven't we? Anfield, we were pretty decent at times. Villa, we probably should have come away with something from there. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that on the back of the Brentford win and the draw at West Ham before that we've also turned a bit of a corner. And we've talked in the debriefs about how maybe Company has stumbled upon a side that is capable of grinding results. It's not all, we're not going into it perhaps like we would have done at the start of the season where we knew we were lambs to the slaughter, are we?
No, and Chelsea was always one of those places that we've got that little bit of heritage, that little bit of history, albeit under the previous manager, of causing absolute mayhem at Stamford Bridge and really upsetting the locals. Whether that's nicking a one apiece or even winning there, or even last time out, when little Vids popped up and nicked a draw, and we probably should have gone on and won it from that point. But it's always enjoyed a trip down there, and you've got there's a few little interesting matchups. Gusto, right back at Chelsea. He's been away with the French under-21s, as has Audebert, who scored over the fortnight. Steve, our mate, has been involved as well. So again, that it's just I think people have been raving about Gusto. I believe he's had quite a solid season. Filling in for Reece James, who's made of glass. But I think Audebert will test him. I think he's a super player. And then you've that Cole Palmer, who I think we were sort of half hoping he might be the loan signing from Manchester City that comes in, and next thing you know, he's a 45 million signing for Chelsea, and he's absolutely bossed it. He's been fabulous, and I hope he's as quiet as he was at Turf Moor earlier this season. Although he obviously scored from the spot, but general open play, I mean, Sterling was the difference in that game. And then you look back at the cup tie I watched against Leicester a couple of weeks ago, and they hounded him. Sterling, they're booing him for I don't know if you saw the free kick that You know, they nearly flew out the stadium, etc.
Still rising, I think, isn't it?
Well, didn't have the greatest game, so it's not a happy camp. They're not too happy with the manager, and Leicester caused them a lot of problems. So you just you're just hoping all these little bits and pieces fall in your favour, and you can at least nick a point out of it, because that would be a hugely positive result.
Yeah, and it is a big win, isn't it? A big week, I should say, Woody, for the Clarets, with Wolves at home on Tuesday, which again falls into that category of, potentially beatable. And then Everton away on Saturday. And then the week after, we've got Brighton at home. It does feel that kind of, on the back of a couple of positive results before the international break, Muric reinstated as well, perhaps, that, if we can just start to pull a couple of results, a draw here or there away, a win at home, we'll at least end the season with some kind of momentum to take into next year, whether it's enough to keep us up or not. And obviously we've still got points deductions, appeals and everything to come probably after the season before we're fully know where we're going to be. But we need momentum, don't we? And that's kind of what we've lacked this season.
That's the ticket. I think these next games that you've just spoken to are probably better benchmarks as to how far we've turned this particular corner. It's not like we're facing a bunch of top six sides. We're facing middle to bottom-ish transition type sides. And Vincent makes a fairly valid point about, there were Chelsea and us who both went with a lot of youngsters this year, and theirs have obviously come to a little bit better fruition than ours has, but they've had some great results and some shocking results. And I mean, I was reading that Chilwell's maybe going to kneecap. Sterling won't be starting because, to Chris's point, he's had a shit house. Mudryk is shit. And I think there's a chance we could get something, especially from the historical perspective of it, as we've upset them on more than one occasion. And I think we might just be up for it a little bit more than they will. Just a little bit more. They might have one eye on the FA Cup, etc. And as far as they're concerned, the season might be rolling down a little bit, and we'll see. But that we are due, like we said, a result against a bigger side. And why not Saturday? So 4-1 Chelsea.
Chelsea, there we go. Reverse psychology again. We're big fans of reverse psychology here.
I've gone for it. Yeah.
I think we've kind of, we've almost convinced Justin ourselves
it's going to be worth it.
Yeah,
that's not made an absolute disaster of a mistake to kind of go there. But
the beauty of the whole thing is, I've got 5 hours each way on the coach where I can just do nothing and have a bit of a sleep. That never happens. So I'm looking forward. I've got that to look forward to, even if the game's awful.
Imagine that.
You'll not be saying that on way home when it's you've got another 4 hours to go, and it's like, oh my word.
The driver has to have an hour break because he's clocked up all his hours. All his hours. He just worked it out because clocks are due to go back tomorrow and all this carry on and all that. But let's just end then with a very brief discussion about James Trafford and not in a Burnley capacity. But Trafford, of course, called up to the full England squad for in place of Sam Johnson, who we know now he's going to miss the rest of the season. I mean, he's obviously had a mixed time at things between the sticks at Turf Moor and for the Clarets. But just hats off. He's, international level. He's proved himself in the under-21s and perhaps deserved that call up to at least train with the seniors to make up the numbers. But is it realistic to think that he might grab that third spot that look to be Johnson's for the Euros in the summer, or do you see it as kind of, it's convenient he was at St George's Park, he might as well train and step up to save us having to call somebody else up?
Yes, I think it's exactly that, and I think he's probably got no chance of going to the Euros with the senior squad. But from my perspective, I think it's something to celebrate. We've got another goalkeeper in the England squad. whatever the circumstances are, that can't be bad for the player. And being around those, those coaches, being around those other goalkeepers, being in that environment, that can't be bad for him. And it can't be bad for the club to have another, another goalkeeper joining the England squad. I don't know why anybody would complain about that. And I think he's probably been unfairly the focus of a lot of discontent about Burnley's situation this season. I've never really thought that he was at the heart of all the issues that we had. Obviously, there's some things about his general performances that have been disappointing and made things difficult. But we've also had that thing where we've had a player on the bench who everybody has a lot of time for, so that's been a little bit of a focus for it. But I think he's been unfairly the focus of it. I can't think of a lot of situations where he's been the direct cause of our demise. He spent a lot of time picking the ball out of the back of the net, and I'm not 100% convinced that that's been his fault. So I'm happy for him. I'm happy for the club. I think it's a positive thing. But will he go to the Euros? No chance.
Chris, I know we were kind of looking at his chances before we came on air, and it does seem unlikely, doesn't it, with kind of, other keepers coming back into contention, including another one with a Burnley link in Nick Pope. But just seems right. It is something for us to celebrate. The kid has kind of, as we've discussed a few times, been hung out to dry a little bit by his manager for not removing him from the situation. But it's kind of a bit of a bright spark in an otherwise, relatively, by his standards, probably a disappointing season.
Oh, it'll mean the world to him. The fact that he's, the under-21 keeper is fabulous enough for the player, and the highs he experienced in the summer in the European tournament. But he's. If you look, so obviously Tom was Burnley's first, Tom Heaton, Burnley's first England representative since Dobbo. And then since then, it's been almost a conveyor belt. Even Corky got a couple of minutes, Michael Keane, Tarky, Popey, and there's still that. When Trips runs out, in my mind, he's still that little fella that we took on loan and then signed permanently, and he's still our Trips. So, things like that. But it's great for him to. He's obviously. I said earlier on this season, in his mind, his mentality, he should be looking at, the Pickfords and people like that and thinking, I'm playing in the Premier League, I'm, one thing at a time, but I've got to aspire to that level and try and push to get into that three. Butland's seemingly come back into the fray. Henderson's been pushed out as Johnson's been playing. Now Johnson's injured, so Henderson will probably finish the season at Palace. Popey's been out most of the season. Sounds like Popey will finish the season. So if Popey's fit, Popey will go. And then it's, you would imagine Ramsdale takes the third slot. But he's every chance moving forward. He's hopefully he'll have learnt an awful lot from this season. It's a learning curve, and very much hope that we see the best of him. But it's going to be a battle royale, isn't it, for the goalkeeping berth? If Muric shows what we know he's capable of and builds on his performance last time out.
Yeah. And just finally, Woody, final word from you. I mean, we've talked a lot about kind of whether we're going to be in the Championship or we're going to be in the Premier League. And you kind of wonder that, if Muric doesn't get assurances, he might be off in the summer. But it could be that actually Trafford is, we get the best out of Trafford in the Championship. And perhaps retrospectively, we kind of go, maybe we should have given him a year in the Championship at a big club this season. And then, perhaps not saying we'd have definitely stayed in the Premier League, but then transition into our Premier League thinking from in future years. But Chris is right, and Justin's right. He has got a future, hasn't he? And you kind of hope that actually a bit of a spell on the sidelines, take him out of the firing line. This England call up, he perhaps will go away with the under-21s again before the end of the season. I'm not sure when the next breaks are, but it's a bit of a pick-me-up, if you will, a bit of momentum going into the new year, having spent 5-6 days with the big boys at St. George's.
Yeah, I hope it has done his confidence a little bit of good, because I think he deserves it after some of the shit he's got from, his own fans, arguably this season. And it's probably definitely within the top 6 reckoning of English keepers for the Euros. But like everybody said, Pope's going to be there so long as he's fit, from an experience and an ability standpoint, etc. So unless there are additional injuries, you can't see him really going to the Euros. But I really don't think he would disappoint if he was called upon. I think arguably even international football could suit him better, because there isn't necessarily that press like there is in the Premier League. He could have an absolute field day in the final, save a penalty, etc. And we get 60 million for him off the back of it. Thanks for coming, everybody sorted.
There we go. We can reduce the over 65s and under 22 tickets then, can't we? Thanks to Trafford. Yeah. Absolutely incredible. Well, let's leave it there. I do hate ending on a positive, but we're going to have to end on a positive because we've given Justin reason to believe that his trip to Stamford Bridge is going to be good. We've touted England's chances of winning the Euros at the feet of James Trafford, or the hand of James Trafford. So things have gone slightly bonkers towards the end, but we'll be back on Monday with a debrief episode from that Chelsea game. If Justin's back in time of his kind of horse and cart trip back from that there London. London, you'll have everybody in Didsbury going, London? You're going London? Oh, be careful.
There's pickpockets there.
From your nan for London.
£6 a pint.
You'll be used to it in Didsbury. Anyway, you enjoy your trip to Stamford Bridge. Hopefully 3 points, or at least a single point. We'll be coming back to Lancashire with you for that. We'll be back then. Don't forget to follow us on social media at BO Podcast. And the shop is still open for all your Easter gifts and whatever else we've got coming up. There is some other kind of nonsense celebration coming up, I'm sure. But enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the elongated Easter weekend, whatever you're doing. And we'll see you again soon.